Imagine, though I'm sure many still can, living in a disunified America, divided on the basis of gender, religion, and especially race. Issues many of us still face today in the wake of this new era of terror. But I believe we can look to the civil rights activists of the 60s to help fight for a more unified and free America. Barbara Jordan, a black Texas congresswoman in the 60s, expertly tackles these exigencies in the face of law, oppression, and towards her communities. She expertly addresses the Democratic National Convention in 1976 by pointing out the rift in the Americans and the importance of her as a black voice.
Now that I have this grand distinction, what in the world am I supposed to say? I could easily spend this time praising the accomplishments of this party and attacking the Republicans, but I don't choose to do that. I could list the many problems which Americans have. I could list the problems which cause people to feel cynical, angry, frustrated. Problems which include lack of integrity in government, the feeling that the individual no longer counts, the reality of material and spiritual poverty, the feeling that the grand American experiment is failing or has failed. I could recite these problems, and then I could sit down and offer no solutions. But I don't choose to do that either. The citizens of America expect more, deserve, and they want more than a recital of problems.
Using TexasHistory.com for teachers, I discovered Barbara Jordan was born on February 26, 1936, in Houston, Texas. Her parents, Benjamin Jordan and Arlene Patton Jordan, were both well involved in their community, her father a preacher and her mother a teacher. And well educated, her father having a college degree from Tuskegee Institute and her mother being a public speaker. Barbara Jordan was the youngest of three sisters and grew up in Houston's Fifth Ward during the time and history of the Jim Crow laws in a racially segregated community. Attending racially segregated schools until university, Barbara Jordan graduated as a top student and champion orator at Wheatley High School in 1952. She then attended Texas Southern University, segregated as an all-black college at the time, where she majored in political science and history. She was a top member of her speech and debate team and earned her bachelor's degree in 1956. After she earned her law degree at Boston University, passing the bar exam and moving back to Houston to practice law, she began her professional years, where she was very active in her community, similar to her parents, and she was a member of numerous legal sororities, including Harris County Democrats and Houston Council of Human Relations. She often held high positions of authority here. Her first job was an administrative assistant for a Harris County court judge, but when the political campaign of JFK in 1960, her career took a political turn. While still a young political leader herself, she managed the Get Out of the Vote program in Houston that served 40 predominantly Black communities. After joining JFK's campaign, she would then help a multitude of campaigns for other political leaders, and after running 3 times for Texas Senate seat, she won in 1966, being the first African American senator elected since 1883. Elected as the president of the Texas Senate in 1972, Barbara Jordan became the first Black woman to oversee a legislative body in America. She passed bills setting the state's minimum wage, anti-discrimination laws, business contracts, and the Texas Fair Employment Practices Commission. In order to understand the importance behind Barbara Jordan's speech, it's important to understand why we need to analyze rhetoric and speech. According to San Diego State University, rhetoric investigates how language is used to organize and maintain social groups, construct meanings and identities, coordinate behavior, mediate power, produce change, and create knowledge. Lloyd F. Bitzer, writer of The Rhetorical Situation and speech analytical theorist, introduced the idea that there were analytical theories and patterns that aided in rhetoric, and rhetoric's purpose was to persuade. Bitzer states the rhetorist alters reality by bringing into existence a discourse of such a character that the audience, in thought and action, is so engaged that it becomes a mediator of thought. Bitzer, in which Barbara Jordan does expertly. The rhetorical exigence here, Jordan addresses almost immediately. The problem America faces is that it's divided on interest groups. Arguing that the government must actively work to ensure individual achievement is not inhibited based on factors such as race, class, ethnicity, gender, and religion. According to civilrightsandhistory.com, the civil rights exigence was in the 1960s began with white people in the South feeling the need to regain power after the Emancipation Proclamation, doing so with the creation of Jim Crow laws and other non-legal segregation tactics. The change in American class systems as a result of industrialization changed American culture and landscape. With the rise of industrialization, a middle class, and suburbia, we have the beginnings of redlining and ghettos. A documentary done by New York City students Green and Vieira discovered the demolishing of Black and Brown communities for New York City projects and the gentrification of non-white areas. Violence against Black Americans grows drastically too, whether violence against peaceful protesters, activists, or even just shop owners and business keepers. Furthermore, the Congress on Racial Equity launched the Freedom Rides projects to integrate interstate buses, in which they had volunteers and protesters ride white sections of the buses. Often, they faced beatings and lynchings. Racially motivated bombings were at an all-time high, reaching numbers of over 50 post-World War II, according to John Green of Civil Rights. With the rise of Jim Crow laws and the white supremacism as anger of the loss of slaves, the rise of lynching, and almost like an unknown return of the KKK with the civil rights movement further extended to its hatred to more people of color. Ultimately, Barbara Jordan tackles this exigence of this division in America using ethos, pathos, and logos in her rhetorical speech. But defining pathos, logos, and ethos using St. Louis Community College, we know that pathos is to persuade an audience by purposely evoking certain emotions to make them feel the way the author wants them to feel. Logos is where the author makes clear, logical connections between ideas and includes the use of facts and statistics. Using historical and literal analogies to make a logical argument is another strategy. Ethos is where the writer can communicate their authority by using credible sources, choosing appropriate language, demonstrating that they have fairly examined the issue by considering the counterargument, and introducing their own professional, academic, or authorial credentials, introducing their own personal experience with the issue.
Spokesperson for her cause, demonstrating strong rhetorical skills. To analyze Jordan's use of her structure in her 1976 keynote address to the Democratic National Convention, I will identify where Jordan utilizes ethos, logos, and pathos to appeal defined through pathos, logos, and ethos.com. We will then see how Jordan demonstrates the exigence of the civil rights of the 20th century, speaking to an audience of other Democrats, presenting her credibility as a political speaker. To begin with pathos, the pathos utilized by Barbara Jordan in her speech is actually quite unique. Rather than pandering to emotion by garnering sympathy from the audience towards herself, she addresses the audience as a common body, a team. The word she utilizes most, her speech being we and people, indicating her personification of the Democratic Party as a being made up of people, and that they, herself included, have duties to America as a political party to fulfill. This presents multiple powerful angles that aid in the rhetorical persuasion of the speech, that she too is a political leader and is not immune to mistake and public ridicule, and that audience holds as much power as political leaders when unified. According to Alison Wallen, writer of the article What Would Barbara Jordan Say?, she emphasizes the importance of Jordan's presence as a Black woman and how she chose to present herself in the speech.
But there is something different about tonight. There is something special about tonight. What is different? What is special? I, Barbara Jordan, am a keynote speaker.
The logos utilized by Barbara Jordan is when she makes generalizations without falling victim to logical fallacies, defined by Brett and Kate McKay on classical rhetoric as an error in reasoning that occurs when invalid arguments or irrelevant points are introduced without any evidence to support them. This meaning the arguments she makes are backed up by sound societal logic, trusting that fundamental rights are logical. Are we to be one people bound together by a common spirit, sharing in a common endeavor, or will we become a divided nation? Jordan says, using this antithesis statement, she asks the audience this rhetorical question that seeks to highlight the grave importance of the decision between division and unity. Antithesis, being a juxtaposition of contrasting ideas, also serves as a weighing mechanism for freedom, either come together through a common spirit or be divided by a nation. She utilizes the idea of fundamental rights being logical as a source of that credibility.
Of America, we are attempting to fulfill our national purpose to create and sustain a society in which all of us are equal.
I will now talk about the rhetorical devices that Barbara Jordan utilizes in her speech. In the face of this exigence, Jordan weaves repetitive rhetorical devices like anaphoras, endoploses, and epistrophes to remind and affirm her audience that there is expected accountability of public officials to renew harmony. Using definitions from author Matt McGrady on rhetorical devices, I have identified a few of these specific uses. Her use of anaphoras, for example, is the repetition of words or phrases in the beginning of clauses, with the word we reaffirming that she is not a separate identity from the audience, constantly reminding them that they are fighting the same battle.
We are a people in a quandary about the present. We are a people in search of our future. We are a people in search of a national community.
Jordan here uses this rule of three and polysyndetones with the repetition of we are a people, serves to actually reaffirm that there is a need for national unity. The word she utilizes most in her speech being we and people, indicating her personification of the Democratic Party as being made up of people, and that they, herself included, have duties to America as a political party to fulfill.
We are a people trying not only to solve the problems of the present, unemployment, inflation, but we are attempting on a larger scale to fulfill the promise of America.
She maintains this rhetorical balance through switching between paragraphs of acetyletones, the omission of abnormal conjunctions, and polysyndetones, the addition of extra conjunctions, being the prose in which she addresses the goals the Democratic Party must fulfill, and the prose where she asks the audience what they feel the purpose as people with political parties are, respectively. Throughout the speech, she uses the rule of three, a tactic of listing out variables that increase in intensity, but often does so through simploses, the repetition of first and last word over successful clauses, taken from Professor McGarty. This not only adds auditory interest, but also makes it concise and clear what she finds necessary to do through repeating phrases like, if we, then we must.
We are a party of innovation. We do not reject our traditions, but we are willing to adapt to changing circumstances. When change we must, we are willing to suffer the discomfort of change in order to achieve a better future.
To move on to Jordan's overall use of nonverbal and oral delivery, using tonal fluctuations and dictation, Barbara Jordan effectively argues her message across, getting louder and emphasizing the we in her repetitive clauses, reminding them that they are unified, or slowing down and lowering her tone, but not loudness of voice, on words like freedom, when emphasizing that there is a need for freedom as if it is in danger. Toastmasters International article on public speaking tips emphasizes the importance of auditory and tactile changes that Jordan uses throughout her speech to captivate her audience and emphasize the points that are most important. Using this form of thesis, contentions, and conclusion, it implies a formal argument is being given. Furthermore, when Barbara Jordan gives the speech, as clearly shown in many by the multiple clips, she is confident, stands strongly, and projects her voice. She gives off an aura of a professional, political leader and speaker, and immediately as she creates her space on that stage, she commands respect. She often uses her arms and hands in motion to further emphasize points, like waving her hands and gestures, implying that she is regarding the audience, speaking with them as if they are unified. Posture straight with very specific and strategic enunciation and eloquence of voice, she delivers the speech like a political leader, like a lawmaker, and like she is well educated and well resourceful, and most importantly, logical.
We have a positive vision of the future, founded on the belief that the gap between the promise and reality of America can one day be finally closed. We believe that.
So what does this tell us about the legacy of Barbara Jordan? Well, Alison Wallen, writer of the article What Can We Learn from Barbara Jordan's Speech Today, emphasized the importance of the simple fact that she, as a Black female politician, was chosen to speak in front of the DNC was a history-altering fact. This, coupled with the rhetorical situation that she was tackling, the division of America. America, heavily engaged in civil rights at the moment of this time, was especially disbanded in trying to gain rights for different groups, like women, people of color, the queer community, and even rural farmers. Thus, when faced with a divided country, it's now more important than ever to utilize persuasive tactics, rhetoric tactics, that appeal to the political mind of the populace to thus conquer the problems of the contemporary. Barbara Jordan, in her 1976 keynote address to the DNC, is an exemplar moment in history where rhetorical devices were being used to address the exigency of America. Her not only being a Black woman, but a Black woman looking for progressive gain in a world deeming Black voices inherently radical, she implies that this is why history has been altered. Jordan introduces the keynote address by directly asking the audience, and our meeting this week is a continuation of that tradition, but there is something different about tonight. There is something special about tonight. What is different? What is special? I, Barbara Jordan, am the keynote speaker. Neuroscience researcher at UCSF, Tanisha Hill-Jarrett, in her study of the Black radical imagination, talks on how Black voices are seen as inherently radical. It references not only the historical oppression, but also the battle Black people still face in the legal equality systemic oppression. The simple idea that Black women could be a political leader was seen as radical, and thus this word radical has underlying, implying violent implications. We refer to terrorists as radicals. In conclusion, when we look back into this division in America, we can take away from Barbara Jordan's life's work, but especially from her DNC speech, that America, in order to gain unity and ultimately freedom and equality, must not only look to the basis of the American dream for equality, but we must listen to each other and hear each other's voices. After learning about the life and legacy of Barbara Jordan, her use of rhetoric in her speech, and her legacy, I understand that her speech can be referenced to this day, with her use of rhetoric, but also what she chooses to say. When Black imagination, passion, innovation, creativity, and power has been directly linked to the idea of radicalization, it's important to know the tactics of peace-seeking and changing Black stereotypes and prejudices in Barbara Jordan's keynote address to the DNC as well, where she highlights the importance of her being chosen as the speaker, and the importance of national unity and harmony when seeking freedom. Thank you, and this is Taylor Quinto.